The gunshot that killed Sarah Matthers' husband echoed through her dreams every night, a sound that shattered more than just the silence of their ranch outside Abilene, Kansas, in the spring of 1878. She woke before dawn most mornings, the phantom crack of rifle fire pulling her from sleep. And today was no different as she sat up in bed, her heart hammering against her ribs, sweat dampening her cotton nightgown despite the cool morning air that seeped through the gaps in the wooden walls. 3 months had passed since the bank robbery that took James from her. 3 months since she watched him bleed out on the dusty street while she screamed for help that came too late. And the wound inside her chest felt as raw as if it had happened yesterday. Sarah pushed herself out of bed and dressed mechanically in her worn calico dress, her fingers fumbling with the buttons as they did every morning, her mind somewhere else entirely, trapped in that terrible afternoon when everything changed. She was 24 years old and felt ancient, hollowed out like a dead tree still standing but with nothing alive inside. The ranch needed tending, the horses needed feeding, and life continued its relentless march forward whether she wanted it to or not. She tied her dark hair back with a faded ribbon and walked out into the breaking dawn, breathing in the smell of prairie grass and dust. The horses nickered softly as she approached the stable, and she found comfort in their simple needs, the straightforward nature of caring for animals who asked nothing of her but food and water and gentle hands. She was forking hay into the stalls when she heard the sound of hooves approaching, slow and steady, and her body tensed instinctively. Visitors were rare out here, and after what happened to James, she trusted no one. The rider who appeared in her barn doorway was tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He wore dusty trail clothes and a hat that had seen better days, and he sat his buckskin horse with the easy grace of a man born in the saddle. He touched the brim of his hat when he saw her, a gesture of respect that seemed genuine. "Morning, ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble that carried a hint of Texas in its drawl. "Name's Cole Brennan. My horse threw a shoe about 2 miles back, and I was wondering if you might have a spare or know where I could find a blacksmith." Sarah gripped the pitchfork tighter, studying him with wary eyes. He looked harmless enough, but so had the men who robbed the bank before they started shooting. "There's a smithy in town," she said, her voice flat and unwelcoming. "About 8 miles east." Cole nodded slowly, seeming to understand her caution. "Much obliged. I don't suppose you'd have some water I could give my horse before we head that way. She's had a hard morning." Sarah hesitated, then jerked her head toward the trough. "Help yourself." She watched as he dismounted and led his mare to the water, speaking softly to the animal, his hands gentle as he checked her hooves. There was something careful in the way he moved, as if he was very aware of not making any sudden gestures that might alarm either the horse or the woman watching him. When the mare had drunk her fill, he straightened and looked at Sarah again. "I appreciate the kindness, ma'am. I'll be on my way now." He started to lead his horse past her, then paused. "If you don't mind my saying, you look like you could use some help around here. I'm good with horses and fair with repairs. I could work for just food and a place to sleep in the barn for a few days while I figure out my next move." "No," Sarah said immediately, the word sharp as a knife. "I don't need help." Cole studied her for a long moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see more than she wanted him to. "All right then," he said quietly. "But if you change your mind, I'll be in town for a spell. You can leave word at the saloon." He mounted up and rode away, and Sarah told herself she was relieved to see him go. She didn't need anyone, didn't want anyone. She had learned the hard way that letting people into your life just meant more pain when they were torn away. But over the next week, as she struggled to fix a broken fence post and watched one of her mares develop a limp she couldn't diagnose, she found herself thinking about the cowboy with the quiet voice and careful hands. She told herself it was foolish, that hiring a stranger was asking for trouble. But the ranch was slowly falling apart around her, and pride wouldn't hold the fences together or heal a lame horse. On the 8th day after Cole Brennan had ridden away, Sarah hitched up her wagon and drove into Abilene. The town was bustling with activity, cowboys and cattle dealers and farmers all conducting their business under the hot Kansas sun. She found the saloon easily enough, a weathered building that smelled of whiskey and tobacco, and she stood outside for a full 5 minutes working up the courage to go inside. Respectable women didn't enter saloons, but then again, respectable women didn't live alone on failing ranches either. The bartender, a grizzled man with more beard than face, looked surprised to see her but listened to her request. Cole Brennan. Yeah, he's been staying in the room upstairs, working odd jobs around town. Seems like a decent fellow, keeps to himself mostly. I'll fetch him for you. Sarah waited outside, her hands twisting together nervously, and when Cole emerged a few minutes later, his eyebrows rose in surprise. He looked the same as before, maybe a bit cleaner, and when he saw her, his expression softened into something that might have been understanding. Mrs. Matthers, he said, and she was startled that he knew her name, though she supposed everyone in town knew about the widow whose husband was killed in the robbery. What can I do for you? The offer you made, Sarah said, forcing the words out past the tightness in her throat. Does it still stand? It does. Just work for food and a place in the barn, nothing more, and if I tell you to leave, you leave, no arguments. Fair enough, Cole said, and there was no judgment in his face, no pity, just acceptance. I'll get my things. They rode back to the ranch together, Sarah in her wagon and Cole on his newly shod horse, and the silence between them was heavy with things unsaid. When they arrived, Sarah showed him the barn where he could bed down, pointed out what needed fixing, and then retreated into the house, her sanctuary, the only place where she felt even remotely safe. Cole proved to be as good as his word. He rose with the sun and worked until dusk, repairing fences, tending the horses, fixing the leak in the barn roof that Sarah had been ignoring for weeks. He was quiet and respectful, never pushing, never asking questions, and Sarah found herself relaxing incrementally in his presence. He had a way with the animals that bordered on magical. The mare that had been limping was sound again within 3 days under his care, and even the ornery stallion that usually tried to bite anyone who came near him seemed to calm around Cole. At first, Sarah left his meals on the porch and retreated inside before he could thank her. But as days turned into weeks, she found herself lingering, watching him work from the kitchen window, noticing the way he moved with efficient grace, the way he smiled when one of the barn cats rubbed against his legs. He never tried to engage her in conversation beyond what was necessary for the work, and paradoxically, this made her want to talk to him more. One evening, nearly 3 weeks after he'd arrived, Sarah found herself setting 2 plates on the porch table instead of 1. Cole looked surprised when he came up from the barn and saw her sitting there, but he washed up at the pump and joined her without comment. They ate in silence for several minutes before Sarah finally spoke. "Why did you come back?" she asked. "That day, you could have found work anywhere." Cole chewed thoughtfully before answering. "Seemed like you needed help, and I needed a place to be for a while. Running from something? Not exactly. Just not ready to settle anywhere permanent yet." Sarah understood that feeling more than she cared to admit. "The town probably talks," she said, "about you staying here." "Probably," Cole agreed. "Does that bother you?" "Everything bothers me," Sarah said, and was surprised by her own honesty, "but I'm too tired to care what people think anymore." Cole nodded as if this made perfect sense, and they finished their meal in companionable quiet. It became a routine after that, eating together on the porch as the sun set, sometimes talking, sometimes not. Cole told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to ride before he could walk, about losing his family to fever when he was 16 and drifting ever since. Sarah found herself talking too, carefully at first, about the ranch, about the struggle to keep it running, but never about James, never about that day. That was still too raw, too painful to expose to the air. Summer deepened, and the Kansas heat became oppressive, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer and turned the ground hard as stone. Sarah and Cole fell into an easy partnership, working the ranch together, and Sarah realized with some surprise that the nightmares were coming less frequently. She still heard the gunshot in her dreams, still woke with her heart racing, but there were nights now when she slept through until morning, peaceful and undisturbed. Cole never asked for more than she was willing to give, never pushed for confidences or closeness, but his presence was a steady comfort, solid and dependable. He was there when a summer storm blew in and threatened to tear the barn roof off, working beside her in the driving rain to secure it. He was there when one of the mares foaled in the middle of the night, his hands gentle and sure as he helped the struggling mother. He was just there, and Sarah found herself depending on that presence more than she wanted to admit. One afternoon in late July, Sarah was in the garden behind the house when she heard raised voices from the front. Her blood ran cold as she recognized one of them as belonging to Thomas Garrett, the son of the rancher who owned the spread to the north. Thomas had been sniffing around ever since James died, making it clear he thought a woman alone had no business trying to run a ranch, offering to buy her out for a fraction of what the land was worth. She'd refused every time, but he kept coming back, and each visit he grew more insistent and less polite. Sarah came around the side of the house to find Thomas on his horse, looking down at Cole with undisguised contempt. "I'm here to see Mrs. Matthers," Thomas was saying. "Ranch business. Not something that concerns a hired hand. Mrs. Matthers doesn't want to sell," Cole said calmly, standing between Thomas and the house. "She's made that clear. I'll hear it from her." "You're hearing it from me," Cole said, and there was steel in his voice now, a hardness that Sarah hadn't heard before. "And I'm telling you it's time to leave." Thomas's hand moved toward the gun at his hip, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat, terror flooding through her. "Not again, please God, not again." But Cole didn't move, didn't reach for his own weapon, just stood there with that same calm steadiness, and after a long, tense moment, Thomas's hand fell away. "This isn't over," Thomas spat, then wheeled his horse around and rode off in a cloud of dust. Sarah realized she was shaking, her hands trembling so badly she had to clasp them together. Cole turned and saw her, and his expression softened immediately with concern. "You all right?" "I can't," Sarah said, and her voice was breaking, cracking apart like dried clay. "I can't do this. I can't watch someone else die for this piece of land. I should just sell, just leave, just—" "Hey," Cole said, moving toward her slowly, carefully. "Hey, it's all right, nobody's dying. Thomas Garrett is all bluster." "That's what I thought about the bank robbers," Sarah said, and suddenly she was crying, great wrenching sobs that she'd been holding back for 4 months, tears streaming down her face as the dam finally broke. James just happened to be walking past the bank when they ran out. They shot him for no reason, just shot him because he was there. He died in my arms, and there was so much blood, and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't save him, and I can't lose anyone else. I can't." She was barely aware of Cole guiding her to sit on the porch steps, his presence solid beside her as she fell apart. He didn't try to touch her beyond that, didn't offer empty platitudes, just sat with her while she cried out months of grief and fear and rage. When the storm finally passed and she was left exhausted and hollow, he handed her his bandana and waited quietly while she mopped her face. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, her voice hoarse. "I shouldn't have. You got nothing to apologize for," Cole said firmly. "Grief doesn't follow a schedule." They sat in silence for a while, and then Sarah found herself talking, really talking, telling him about James, about their plans for the ranch, about the future they'd dreamed of that died with him on that dusty street. Cole listened without interrupting, and when she finally ran out of words, he spoke quietly. "I lost someone too," he said. "Long time ago, girl I was planning to marry back in Texas. Sickness took her the winter I turned 20. I thought I'd die from the pain of it. Couldn't imagine ever feeling whole again. Does it get better? Sarah asked. It gets different, Cole said. The sharp edges wear down, you learn to carry it. I don't know if I can. You're stronger than you think, Cole said, and there was something in his voice, a warmth that made Sarah's heart skip. You've been carrying it this whole time. You're still standing. That takes more strength than most people have. Sarah looked at him then, really looked at him, seeing not just the hired hand who fixed her fences but the man beneath, the one who'd lost and grieved and kept going anyway. His eyes met hers, and there was understanding there, a recognition of shared pain and something else too, something that made her breath catch. Cole, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I'm too broken inside to love anyone. He held her gaze steadily, and when he spoke, his words were gentle but absolute. I'll wait until you're ready. The simplicity of it, the patience in those words, cracked something open in Sarah's chest. Not her heart, not yet. That was still too battered and bruised, but something, a tiny space where light could get in. She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing, just sat beside him as the sun sank lower and the Kansas sky turned gold and crimson. The incident with Thomas Garrett didn't repeat itself, but it changed something between Sarah and Cole. There was a new awareness now, an acknowledgement of feelings neither of them was ready to name. Cole continued to work the ranch, continued to respect the boundaries Sarah had set, but there were moments when their eyes met across the yard and something electric passed between them, something that both thrilled and terrified her. August arrived with scorching heat and news from town that the men who'd robbed the bank and killed James had been caught down in Oklahoma territory. The marshal rode out to tell Sarah personally, perhaps expecting relief or satisfaction, but all she felt was tired. Vengeance wouldn't bring James back, wouldn't heal the hole in her life. She thanked the marshal and went back to work, but that night she dreamed of James for the first time in weeks, not of his death but of their wedding day, and she woke with tears on her face and an ache in her chest. Cole found her the next morning sitting on the porch staring out at nothing. He sat down beside her without asking, and after a long silence, Sarah spoke. The marshal came yesterday. They caught the men who killed James. I heard in town, Cole said quietly. How do you feel? Empty, Sarah admitted. Like it should mean something, but it doesn't change anything. He's still gone. Justice doesn't bring people back, Cole agreed, but maybe it can help you move forward. I don't know how to move forward, Sarah said, and her voice was small, lost. I don't know how to be anything but afraid and angry and sad. Cole was quiet for a moment, and then he said, You don't have to know. You just have to keep breathing, keep waking up, keep going. The how figures itself out along the way. Is that what you did after you lost her? Eventually, Cole said. Took me a long time. I wandered for years, working ranch to ranch, never staying anywhere long because staying meant feeling, and I wasn't ready to feel anything but numb. Then one day I woke up and realized I could remember her smile without wanting to die, could think about the future without it seeming empty. It didn't happen all at once. It was slow, like watching the seasons change. Sarah absorbed this, drawing comfort from the fact that he'd survived his grief, that survival was possible. When you rode up that morning, she said slowly, why did you really come back? When I sent word, Cole looked at her then, and his green eyes were honest and clear. Because I saw something in you that first day, something I recognized. You were hurting and alone and trying so damn hard to be strong, and I thought maybe I could help. Maybe helping you would help me too, and I was right. You needed help. Everyone needs help sometimes, Cole said. I'd been drifting so long I forgot what it felt like to have a purpose, a reason to stay in one place. This ranch, working beside you, it reminded me that I'm still alive, still capable of building something instead of just passing through. Sarah's throat tightened with emotion. I'm glad you stayed, she whispered. So am I, Cole said, and his hand moved slowly, carefully, until it covered hers on the weathered wood of the porch. Sarah stiffened instinctively, but he didn't push, didn't press. Just let his hand rest there, warm and solid, offering comfort without demanding anything in return. After a moment, Sarah turned her hand over and laced her fingers through his, and they sat like that until the sun climbed high and the work of the day called them away. The walls around Sarah's heart didn't come down all at once, but they began to crack, little by little, day by day. She found herself smiling more, laughing at Cole's dry observations about the stubborn stallion, or the way the chickens always seemed to escape their pen no matter how he reinforced it. She started to look forward to their evening meals together, to the conversations that ranged from the practical to the philosophical, from the price of cattle to the nature of happiness. Cole never pushed for more than she was willing to give, never tried to kiss her or hold her beyond that first touch of hands, but his feelings were clear in the way he looked at her, in the extra care he took with things he knew mattered to her, in the patience that seemed infinite. He was waiting, just as he'd promised, and knowing that gave Sarah the safety she needed to slowly, tentatively, begin to heal. September came with cooler air and the first hints of autumn color touching the trees along the creek. Sarah and Cole brought in the small hay crop together, working from dawn to dusk, and the physical labor felt good, cleansing, a way to tire the body so the mind could rest. On the last day of the harvest, they sat on the porch in the twilight, sweaty and exhausted and satisfied, and Cole produced a bottle of whiskey from somewhere. "To a good harvest," he said, offering her the bottle. Sarah took it and sipped, the burn of the whiskey warming her from the inside. "To not doing it alone," she said, handing it back. "To not being alone," Cole agreed, and the weight of those words settled between them. They passed the bottle back and forth, and as the stars emerged overhead, Sarah felt something shift inside her, a loosening of the tight knot of fear that had lived in her chest for so long. She turned to Cole, studying his profile in the starlight, the strong line of his jaw, the gentle curve of his mouth, and felt her heart beat faster. "Cole," she said, and he turned to look at her, his eyes questioning. "I'm still broken, I'm still scared, but I think I'm ready to try." "Try what?" He asked softly, though she thought he knew. "To let myself feel again, to let myself care, to let myself," she faltered, and he waited, patient as always, "to let myself love you." The smile that spread across Cole's face was like sunrise, slow and warm and brilliant. "You sure?" He asked, and she could hear the hope in his voice, carefully restrained. "No," Sarah admitted, "but I'm sure I want to try." "If you're still willing to wait when I'm not ready, when I need space, when the grief comes back, Sarah," Cole said, and he shifted closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek with infinite gentleness. "I told you I'd wait until you're ready. That doesn't have an expiration date." "I'm not going anywhere. Promise," she whispered. "Promise," he said, and then, very slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned in and kissed her. It was the gentlest kiss Sarah had ever received, soft and sweet and patient, asking nothing, offering everything. She felt tears slide down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of grief this time, they were something else, something that felt like hope. She kissed him back, tentative at first, then with growing confidence, and when they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. "I haven't kissed anyone but James in 6 years, Sarah said, feeling suddenly shy. "Was it all right?" Cole asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice that she found endearing. "It was perfect," Sarah said honestly. "It was terrifying and perfect, and I want to do it again." So he kissed her again, and when they finally went to their separate beds that night, Sarah lay awake feeling something she'd thought she'd never feel again. Happy. The relationship that grew between them over the following months was unlike anything Sarah had experienced before. With James, everything had been easy and uncomplicated, the natural progression of childhood friends who grew up and fell in love and got married. With Cole, everything was more intentional, more conscious, both of them aware of the fragility of the thing they were building, careful with each other's bruises. Cole moved from the barn to the house in October, but he took the spare room, respecting Sarah's need to move slowly, to adjust to sharing her space with someone again. Some nights she would wake from nightmares and find him there, standing in her doorway, checking on her without intruding. Other times she would seek him out, needing the comfort of his presence, and they would sit together in the kitchen drinking coffee and talking until the fear receded. They worked the ranch together as partners now, making decisions jointly, planning for the future. Sarah found that Cole had a good head for business, better than hers. And under his guidance, they sold some of the horses for good prices and invested in improvements that would make the ranch more profitable. For the first time since James died, Sarah felt like the ranch might actually survive, might actually thrive. Winter arrived with cold winds and occasional snow, and the forced closeness of being trapped inside together during storms accelerated their growing intimacy. They played cards by the fire, read books aloud to each other, and talked about everything and nothing. Cole told her about his dreams of someday having a ranch of his own, a place to belong, and Sarah found herself saying, "You could belong here. This could be your ranch too." Cole looked at her seriously. "Is that what you want?" "Yes," Sarah said, and realized she meant it completely. "I want you here. I want us to build this together. She took a breath. "I want a future with you. Are you sure?" Cole asked. "I need you to be sure, Sarah." "I'm already in love with you, have been for months, and if you're not ready for that, you love me," Sarah interrupted, her heart pounding. "How could I not?" Cole said simply. "You're the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. You've taken the worst thing that could happen and kept going, kept fighting, kept living. You inspire me every damn day." Sarah felt tears welling up, but they were good tears this time, healing tears. "I love you too," she said, and saying the words felt like shedding a heavy coat she'd been wearing for too long. "I didn't think I could, didn't think I had it in me anymore, but I do. I love you, Cole Brennan." He pulled her into his arms then, and she went willingly, pressing her face against his chest, feeling his heart beat strong and steady beneath her cheek. "I love you," she said again, because now that she'd started saying it, she couldn't seem to stop. "I love you, I love you, I love you." "I love you too," Cole murmured into her hair, holding her close. "And I'm going to love you for the rest of my life if you'll let me." Sarah pulled back enough to look up at him. "Is that a proposal?" Cole smiled, that slow sunrise smile she'd come to adore. "Not yet. When I propose, it'll be properly, the way you deserve, but it's a promise. I'm yours for as long as you'll have me." "Forever then," Sarah said and kissed him, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back, just pure feeling, pure love, pure joy. They became lovers that night, coming together with tenderness and passion, and Sarah discovered that her body still knew how to feel pleasure, still knew how to respond, still knew how to connect with another person in this most intimate way. Cole was patient and attentive, attuned to her needs, and when she cried afterward, he held her close and understood that these were healing tears, necessary tears, the final release of the grief she'd been carrying for so long. "Thank you," she whispered against his skin. "For what?" "For waiting, for being patient, for loving me even when I was too broken to love you back." "You were never broken," Cole said firmly. "You were hurt. There's a difference. Broken things can't heal, hurt things can, given time and care. You just needed time." Sarah kissed him softly. "I'm so glad you found me." "Best day of my life," Cole agreed, and they fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time in nearly a year, Sarah slept through the entire night without a single nightmare. Christmas came and went quietly, just the two of them exchanging simple gifts and cooking a feast that was far too large for two people. They ate until they were stuffed, then sat by the fire holding hands, and Sarah thought about how different this Christmas was from the last one when she'd been drowning in grief, unable to imagine ever feeling happy again. Life had a strange way of surprising you, she reflected, of bringing good things when you least expected them, of offering second chances when you thought all chances were gone. In January, Thomas Garrett came back, and this time he brought his father with him. The elder Garrett was a hard man with cold eyes, and he made it clear he thought Sarah's refusal to sell was not only foolish but suspicious. "Woman alone can't run a ranch this size," he said bluntly. "It's not natural. You should sell to someone who can work it properly." She's not alone, Cole said, standing shoulder to shoulder with Sarah. And the ranch is running just fine. And who are you? Garrett Sr. demanded. Some drifter she took in, you got no claim here. He has every claim, Sarah said, her voice strong and clear. This is his ranch as much as mine. We're partners, Garrett sneered. That what they're calling it now? Sarah felt her temper flare, but Cole's hand on her arm steadied her. We're not selling, he said calmly. Now I think it's time you left. The Garretts exchanged glances, and for a moment Sarah thought they might push it, might try something foolish, but then the elder Garrett shrugged. Your funeral, he said. When this place fails, don't come crying to us. They rode off, and Sarah let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. They're not going to give up. Probably not, Cole agreed, but we're not either, and we've got the law on our side. This is your land, your ranch. They can't force you to sell. Our land, Sarah corrected. Our ranch. Cole smiled and kissed her forehead. Our ranch, he agreed. In February, on a cold, clear day with snow on the ground, Cole took Sarah for a ride to the highest point on the ranch, a small hill that overlooked the entire spread. They dismounted and stood looking out over the land, the house and barn small in the distance, and Cole took both her hands in his. Sarah Matthers, he said, his voice serious and his eyes warm. I came to this ranch broken and drifting with no purpose and no hope. You gave me both. You gave me a reason to stay, a reason to build, a reason to believe in the future. You've made me happier than I ever thought I'd be again. I love you more than I can say, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you how much. Will you marry me? Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling so hard her face hurt. Yes, she said. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Cole pulled a simple gold band from his pocket, and Sarah recognized the care that had gone into choosing it, the thought behind the gesture. He slid it onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, and then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back. And the world narrowed down to just the two of them and the love that burned between them, bright and warm and real. They were married in April, when the prairie was green and the wildflowers were blooming, in a simple ceremony in the church in Abilene with half the town in attendance. Sarah wore a dress of pale blue calico that she'd sewn herself, and Cole wore his best clothes and looked so handsome it made her heart ache. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Cole kissed her, Sarah felt James's presence, not as a ghost or a source of pain, but as a blessing. A sense that he would have wanted this for her, would have wanted her to find love and happiness again. The reception was held at the ranch, and their neighbors brought food and drink and music, and they danced under the stars until the moon was high. Sarah had never been happier, twirling in Cole's arms, laughing at his jokes, secure in the knowledge that this man loved her, that he would stand by her no matter what came, that their future together was solid and real and full of promise. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. A summer drought tested their water supplies and forced them to sell more cattle than they'd planned. A winter storm killed 3 horses and damaged the barn roof again. But they faced each challenge together, supporting each other, drawing strength from their partnership, and by the time their first anniversary rolled around, the ranch was thriving and they were more in love than ever. In the fall of 1880, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. She told Cole one evening at dinner, unable to keep the secret any longer, and the joy on his face was something she would treasure forever. He jumped up and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing and begging him to put her down. We're having a baby, he kept saying like he couldn't quite believe it. We're going to be parents. Are you happy? Sarah asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. Happy doesn't even begin to cover it, Cole said, his hand settling gently on her still flat stomach. This is everything, Sarah. You're everything. The pregnancy was easier than Sarah had feared, and Cole was attentive to the point of being comically overprotective, refusing to let her do any heavy work and hovering constantly to make sure she was comfortable. Sarah found it endearing and exasperating in equal measure, but mostly she was just grateful, grateful for this second chance at happiness, for this new life growing inside her, for this man who loved her so completely. Their son was born in May of 1881, during a spring storm that matched the intensity of Sarah's labor. Cole stayed with her throughout, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement, and when the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, they both wept with joy. They named him James Cole Brennan, honoring both the past and the future, and Sarah knew with absolute certainty that her first husband would have been proud. Being parents changed them both, deepened their love, gave them a new purpose. Cole was a natural father, patient and gentle, and watching him with their son made Sarah fall in love with him all over again. They were exhausted and overwhelmed and deliriously happy, navigating the challenges of new parenthood together, supporting each other through the sleepless nights and endless diaper changes and moments of pure terror when they were sure they were doing everything wrong. But James was a healthy, happy baby, and he thrived under their love and care. The ranch thrived too, and by the time James was 2, they were successful enough to hire a hand to help with the work, giving them more time to spend as a family. They would take picnics down by the creek, teaching James to splash in the shallow water, or ride out across the prairie with the boy secure in front of Cole in the saddle, showing him the land that would one day be his. In the summer of 1883, Sarah became pregnant again, and this time the baby was a girl, born in February of 1884 with her father's green eyes and her mother's dark hair. They named her Emily Rose, and she was as fierce and determined as her mother, screaming her displeasure when things didn't go her way, making her needs known in no uncertain terms. James adored his little sister, and watching the two of them together filled Sarah with a contentment she'd never thought possible. The years rolled by, full and rich and good. Thomas Garrett eventually gave up trying to buy the ranch and moved to Colorado, and the threat he'd represented faded into memory. The ranch continued to prosper under Sarah and Cole's joint management, and they became respected members of the community, known for their fair dealing and their willingness to help neighbors in need. James grew into a bright, curious boy who loved the horses as much as his father did, and Emily was a whirlwind of energy and mischief, keeping them all on their toes. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Sarah and Cole took a rare evening just for themselves, leaving the children with a neighbor and riding out to the hill where Cole had proposed. They sat watching the sunset, his arm around her shoulders, her head on his chest, and Sarah thought about the broken woman she'd been when they met, the one who'd thought she was too damaged to ever love again. "What are you thinking?" Cole asked, pressing a kiss to her hair. "That I'm glad I was wrong," Sarah said. "About what? About being too broken to love. I wasn't broken, I was just hurting, and you waited until I was ready to heal." Cole tightened his arm around her. "Best waiting I ever did. Best decision I ever made," Sarah agreed, "letting you in. Trusting you, loving you." "I love you too," Cole said. "More now than the day we married, and I'll love you more tomorrow than today. That's my promise to you, Sarah. Every day more love." Sarah turned in his arms and kissed him, and the kiss was full of everything they'd built together, all the joy and struggle and triumph and love. When they finally pulled apart, the sun had set and the stars were emerging, and Sarah thought about how perfect this moment was, how perfect her life was, how grateful she was for second chances and patient cowboys and the healing power of time. They had 2 more children over the next few years, another boy and another girl, and the house that had once been so silent and empty was now full of laughter and noise and life. Sarah would sometimes pause in her work and look around at her family, at Cole teaching the boys to rope, at the girls helping her in the garden, and feel overwhelmed with gratitude. She'd survived the worst thing she could imagine and come out the other side stronger, wiser, more capable of appreciating the good things when they came. Cole never lost his patience, his gentleness, his steady presence that had drawn her to him in the first place. He was her partner in every sense of the word, sharing the work and the worry and the joy, and their love deepened with each passing year, becoming something solid and unshakable, tested by time and hardship and proven true. James, their eldest, eventually took over much of the ranch work, showing the same natural talent his father had, and Emily surprised them all by developing a head for business that rivaled Cole's, handling the accounts and the buying and selling with shrewd intelligence. The younger children were still finding their way, but Sarah had no doubt they would find their own paths, their own talents, supported by the love and security of their family. On a summer evening in 1895, when Sarah was 41 and Cole was 43, they sat on the porch they'd sat on so many times before, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. James had married a girl from town and had 3 children of his own now, and Emily was engaged to a young rancher from the next county over. The younger children were teenagers, full of dreams and plans and energy. "Can you believe this is our life?" Sarah asked, leaning against Cole's shoulder. "Some days it seems impossible," Cole admitted. "When I think about that morning I rode up asking for water for my horse, never imagining I'd find the woman I'd spend my life with." "What made you come back?" Sarah asked, a question she'd asked before but never tired of hearing the answer to. "You did," Cole said simply. "I saw something in you that recognized something in me. We were both hurt, both lost, both trying to figure out how to keep going. I thought maybe we could help each other figure it out, and we did." "We did," Sarah agreed, watching the children play, listening to their laughter echo across the land. "We really did." Cole took her hand and she felt the familiar calluses, the strength in his fingers, the wedding band that matched her own. 17 years of marriage, 20 years of knowing each other, and her heart still skipped when he looked at her a certain way, still warmed when he smiled at her across the room. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Sarah asked. "If you hadn't stopped that day?" "If I hadn't sent word to town?" "Sometimes," Cole said, "but I try not to dwell on the what-ifs. This is what is, and it's better than anything I could have imagined." Sarah thought about James, her first husband, gone now for 17 years but not forgotten. She thought about the woman she'd been, drowning in grief, convinced she'd never be whole again. She thought about Cole's patience, his willingness to wait, his understanding that healing takes time. And she thought about the life they'd built together, brick by brick, day by day, through stubbornness and hope and love. "I'm glad you waited," she said softly. "I'm glad you were worth waiting for," Cole replied, and kissed her as the sun set over the Kansas prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson and rose. Their story wasn't a fairy tale, wasn't perfect or easy or without pain. But it was real, and it was theirs, built on patience and understanding and the willingness to try again even when trying seemed impossible. Sarah had been broken, yes, but breaking isn't the end of the story. Sometimes it's just the beginning, the necessary shattering that allows you to be rebuilt into something stronger, something more beautiful, something more true. As the years continued to pass, Sarah and Cole grew old together, their hair turning silver, their hands becoming gnarled with age and work, but their love remaining constant. They watched their children grow and thrive, watched their grandchildren multiply, and eventually held great-grandchildren in their arms. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through generations, a testament to what they'd built together. When Sarah was 73, Cole 81, they took one last ride to the hill where he'd proposed all those years ago. It was harder now, their bodies not as strong as they once were, but they made it to the top and sat looking out over the land that had been their home, their livelihood, their legacy. "No regrets?" Cole asked, his voice roughened with age but still warm, still full of love. "Not a single one," Sarah said, and meant it with her whole heart. "You gave me back my life, Cole Brennan. You taught me how to love again, how to trust again, how to believe in the future. You waited when I needed time, and you loved me when I was ready. That's the greatest gift anyone could ever give." "The gift was mutual," Cole said. "You saved me just as much as I saved you, maybe more." They sat in silence as the sun set one more time over their beloved prairie, and Sarah thought about the full circle of her life, from joy to grief to healing to joy again. She thought about second chances and patient cowboys and the redemptive power of love. And she thought about how lucky she was, how blessed, to have been given not one great love but two, and to have lived long enough to appreciate both. When they rode back to the house as twilight deepened, the lights were on and smoke rose from the chimney, and they could see their family gathered inside, waiting for them. Sarah and Cole exchanged a smile, a look that encompassed decades of shared history, and walked hand in hand into the warmth and light and love that waited for them. They lived several more years after that, growing frailer but never losing their essential spirits, never losing their love for each other. When Cole finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 86, Sarah grieved but did not break, because he'd taught her that love doesn't end with death, it just transforms, becomes memory and gratitude, and the lasting impact of a life well lived together. She lived another 2 years, surrounded by the family they'd created, and when she died, it was with his name on her lips and a smile on her face. They were buried side by side on that hill where he'd proposed, where they'd watched so many sunsets together. And their descendants continued to work the ranch and tell their story, the story of the broken widow and the patient cowboy who waited for her to heal, who built a love that lasted lifetimes, who proved that second chances are real and worth waiting for, always worth waiting for.